Welcome back to the Adventure Athletes podcast, world's #1 podcast for adventure athletes, celebrating those going through virtuous struggles in order to benefit the world around them. In this week's episode, I sit down with Hannah Rose Nutritionist. Obviously, we talk a lot about nutrition in this episode, starting off with how to figure out how many calories you need to maintain, lose, and gain weight. We talk about how you can eat more and still lose weight, why nutrition is so important in your day-to-day life, how to fuel for big challenges and endurance events, and how to get the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to supplements and which ones really work and are going to be beneficial to you. At the end of each episode, we set a weekly challenge for you guys, the listeners, to get involved with and join the Adventure Athlete community. Talking about community, I have just started a WhatsApp community filled with different subgroups. So if you want to take part, find out more about the Adventure Athletes, what we do, keep up to date with everything that's going on, and just be part of the community that we're building, I'm going to leave a joining link for the WhatsApp group in the description below. So just click that and it will join you up to the WhatsApp group. What I also like to do at the start of each episode is give a shout out to someone that's been inspiring me online, and this week is going to go to James Cooper, known as Smiling Man with 3 Gs on Instagram. He is running a marathon a day for the whole year. Currently he's on like day 155, something crazy like that. So he's run 155 marathons in 155 days. Around work and life and family commitments and everything, he's just keeps going. I have no idea how he does it, to be perfectly honest with you. Talking about challenges, I've obviously got my own tyre flip marathon coming up in less than 12 weeks now. So if you want to donate to my BigMoose fundraiser, which I'm doing it for, click in the description below and you'll find my fundraiser in there. But for now, enjoy the podcast. Like, what happened with your call to adventure?
Yeah, so you've had some guests on that had a really clear, I know it was this exact point, this exact moment in my life, and I don't think I've had the same. It's been kind of like a slow burn. I have had a very sort of comfortable, happy upbringing. I have had very little in the way of sort of trauma or bad experience in my upbringing, very lucky. But I sort of hit mid-20s, so I'd gone through uni, I'd graduated, I was working, I had a good job. I sort of flip-flop between jobs, got to sort of mid to late 20s, and it kind of felt like there was something missing, like life was just passing me by. I was kind of just floating on through and not making the most of it. Like I'm here living a good life, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I've got great people around me. I'm not making enough of this, and I had that constant niggle of you need to do more, you need to make more of what you're doing with your life. And then I eventually sort of plucked up the courage to start. So if I go backwards, actually, from graduating nutritionist, from near enough from the start, I had a few jobs to fill the gap between until I found one that I really enjoyed. And I ended up in like industry nutrition roles, so working for big corporate companies, helping them with product development, working with chefs, all of that kind of stuff. Really interesting, loved the jobs, but it was taking me further and further away from working with people as individuals and that human-to-human interaction. So I eventually plucked up the courage about 3 years ago when an S&C coach that I know asked, would you start taking on one-to-one clients? So I started doing it on the side, outside of my working hours, and have eventually sort of built that up, found the type of athletes I like working with, or just individuals, they're not always athletes, but found a real interest in the people I was working with from the endurance, ultra endurance, these really intense training program type people, all really interesting people, and you know that from this podcast. But there was a spark of interest there of, okay, these guys are doing some really cool stuff. And I think previously I'd sat on the periphery, so I'd watch sporting events or the Olympics or anything, CrossFit, any sort of random Tour de France, like anything that gets coverage. And I'd be really interested in watching it and thinking, oh my God, like this is almost superhuman to see what some of these people are doing. And when I started working with these, not necessarily that level of athlete, but when I started working with these people, it was, this isn't like necessarily a God-given gift. These people are working really hard to get to do all of these amazing things. And it sparked some interest in me then of well, if not necessarily if they can do it, you can do it, but why not dip your toe, have a look, see what's of interest to you, start like training for things rather than just sort of exercising for fun or for the hell of it. So I think it was sort of a twofold thing. Add in a third side of it, I kept dislocating my shoulder, so I kept having to change the type of training that I was doing because I couldn't do the weights for a long time, and I couldn't train the way I used to. So it was all right, well, let's go back to the drawing board. Like swimming, I've always loved swimming. Great rehab once I got to a certain stage of physio, etc. Once I got to a certain level of mobility, etc. And I was like, well, let's just explore that, lean into it and see what this different type of training. That's when I started forcing myself to run. I have a love-hate relationship with running. But yeah, I just thought, fuck it, let's just see what else is out there and try to sort of do different things. And then as I was approaching my 30s, I did a 30 things to do before you turn 30 list. And I put a load of things on there that I'd never done before or I'd always talked about wanting to do. And had just never done it. And I was like, right, I love lists. I love how, like, sort of that accountability of, yeah, we can cross this off. So it's things like, I'd always wanted to try surfing. So let's give it a go. Let's go and have a lesson. Let's try it. Scuba diving. I'm trying to think, there were travel things on there and just experiencing different places, doing something different to normal life and sort of making things a bit more interesting. Because, yeah, it just felt like it was sort of plodding on, and I didn't want that. I didn't want to waste sort of life, the opportunity, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to make more of it.
Yeah, that's quite a good backstory, to be fair.
Okay.
What I find interesting with people's backstories is, like you said, you haven't gone through any specific trauma or anything that you hear from a lot of people that come on these podcasts. And it's something that I've been trying to understand as well, because I've gone through all of that stuff myself. And that's what's driven me to make the change in my life. So what sort of made you start that list and take the action to go forward? Because for me, it was, well, I was homeless and then I was depressed and I broke my ankle, and that's like slingshotted me the other way to try and I feel like that's how I found my balance, is I go from one extreme to the other and then I'm in the middle then. Whereas people that haven't gone to that and then start pushing themselves, I struggle to understand where that comes from.
I have always, I think, played it very safe. So like my knee-jerk reaction to being asked to do something or try something new has always been no, just knee-jerk. And you ask any of my sort of close friends, and I always used to, I say joke, and it's probably not the right word to use, but I'd sort of go through like a quarter-life crisis, is what I called it, in my mid-20s. And it was very much that existential crisis of, I've been lucky, I've been given this great opportunity at life, and I'm aware of that privilege. And don't get me wrong, my parents worked hard. We didn't have loads of everything, but it was comfortable. I had a great upbringing. Went through uni, loved it. Friends, sort of close to family, etc., etc. And sorry, you'll have to get used to me going off on tangents. But I never properly settled in any one job. So I was aware, I was like, I've gone to uni. I am a nutritionist. I'm doing what I studied for. Why am I not enjoying it? And I sort of flip-flop between jobs. My CV's as long as anything. And they were all good jobs. I just never felt quite right for me, or I got bored. Like, I get bored of everything really easily. I'm probably a coach's nightmare, because you give me a training program, I'll do it for a few weeks. And unless I'm being held to account, I get quite bored. Or unless I've found something that really interests me. Fine, right, on to the next thing. And because of all of that, I've sort of flip-flopped between jobs, and nothing ever felt right. And then I was aware that as my coaching, or like nutrition coaching, was getting busier, I was struggling to juggle. I was struggling to juggle employed life and freelance, and it kind of got to a point where I was like, something's got to give. I can't do both. I'm running myself ragged. And it wasn't giving me the time to do the things I liked. Like, I was using my weekends completely to work, at my weekends and evenings, so I wasn't training as much. I wasn't getting outdoors as much, and I really noticed that, especially in the winter. My mood's all over the shop in winter, and I hate it. I always say I'm a bit of a lizard. Like, I'm sort of fueled by the sun, and yeah, I missed having that time to go outside. So I was like, right, I'm gonna bite the bullet. I'm gonna quit my job and go for it and see what happens. And that's given me more time to do things that I want to do and spend more time outside. I've got a new bike, so I'm back cycling, and I'm able to spend the time swimming or running or training or yoga or whatever it is that I'm doing. So yeah, I think it was that awareness. And I think actually, whilst I was working as a nutritionist in industry, I became very aware, because I was working for big corporates, like billions of pounds worth of turnover every year. Not me personally, unfortunately. And I was particularly aware of the disparity between the amount that these corporates were making and food banks and poverty in this country. And I was working with some local charities, started through lockdown. So there was a charity local to me that got set up through lockdown to help individuals living on their own, or those who weren't able to, particularly vulnerable, for example, who didn't feel comfortable going to the supermarkets to get the food shop, or the elderly who didn't want to go down to the doctor's surgery to pick up their prescription. And I ended up working with them from a food perspective, in terms of food donations and helping those that really needed it, and also as like a kindness caller. So for those that were living on their own, spending so much time on their own in complete isolation. And so I saw how bad it got for some of those people, and I was like, well, I'm lucky. I live with my partner. I do FaceTime. I'm of that generation. It's just natural to us. But there are so many people that were in such isolation. I was like, I'm in a position. This feels wasted, and it feels greedy not to help and to sort of share it. So yeah, it's kind of, like I say, it's kind of a mismatch of all things, but I've always been, I think that acute awareness that there are people who are much worse off than me, I want to and should be doing something to help.
Yeah. Where do you feel like that call to adventure has taken you then? Because that's like the start of the journey. Yeah. And I feel like you're nowhere near the end of the journey. No. Like, I feel like you're at the start arc of it.
Yeah. So I still feel like I've got a lot of work to do to get braver. I overthink everything. So taught myself out of stuff quite quickly. So I'll have, whether it's work, whether it's personal, or even like interactions with clients, and going, should I have suggested that, or should I have, like, different people require different personalities. They need to be spoken to differently. It's just sort of how people interact. So I overthink everything, and I'm very aware of my knee-jerk say no to things. So I've stopped doing that. I take a minute to now go, okay, well, what is realistically, what's the worst that could happen? And it's that you end up having that like internal conversation with yourself of, oh, come on, just do it. Just do it. Just try it. So I did my first triathlon about a month ago. I've got a couple more events that I would like to do coming up. So in the grand scheme of this podcast, I think there's still a hell of a long way to go, because there's always somebody doing more than you, isn't there? There's always somebody going further, or lifting heavier, or going crazier in whatever challenge it is that they're doing. And I think that's something I definitely catch myself doing, is comparing myself to others. So it's trying to sort of stay in your lane and tune into what interests you. But yeah, I don't want to say too much, because you're going to hold me to account to something on this podcast, aren't you? You're going to make me commit to something, and I'm not. Again, my knee jerk, everything in me screams no. Like, say no, don't. So yeah, it's just wanting to do more and experience more, and I operate better in shared experience. So like that triathlon, I was really excited to try it, but the bit that kind of got me really excited for it is that I bullied my dad into doing it with me. So my partner did it as well, but like my dad's, I'm going to get told off now if I get his age wrong, 58 now I think, cyclist, really keen cyclist, and loves swimming, running, take it or leave it, but can do it. So I managed to sort of say, look, I want to do this, I want to try it, let's do it together. And we don't live locally, so training was totally separate. We didn't get to do that together, but it was really cool to actually do it on the day, and to sort of at different points cross paths because of what we're both good and bad at. But it was so cool after we'd crossed the finish line and you both stood there, and it's that feeling of, oh my God, like I've actually done it. And I know you'll have people listening to this, and perhaps not, because I'm sure they're all really lovely listeners, but I go, triathlon, like that's not a lot. Like even before I did it, I caught myself when I told people I was doing a triathlon, and they were like, oh, what distance? And I'd be like, only a sprint. I'm like, I need to stop because I'm already putting it down against something that I've never done before. And it's like, I know I work with people who are doing Ironman and who are doing stupid distances and crazy long runs, crazy long swims. But for me, I kind of need to be eased into it. I don't think I can jump in both feet first. Possibly more so if I've got other people around me who I can do it with. And then it's that, okay, it's a shared experience. If they can do it, I can do it. And we can figure it out together. Whereas I find it quite daunting, that idea of doing something on my own. But yeah, so no, I think definitely. I think I'm still quite early on, exactly as you just observed, figuring out what to do next. Yeah.
I feel like I'm the other end of the spectrum to you, because I will just... The thing that excites me is the fact that no one else is doing it.
See, that terrifies me. So my brain immediately goes, there's a reason nobody else is doing it, don't be so ridiculous. Whereas your brain goes, no, I like this is exciting. I guess you've managed to harness that fear, would you say? Or is there not a fear switch in your head?
Not with this side of things. There is with, like, I do overthink a lot as well. I'm a massive overthinker, and there are lots of things that terrify me, but these challenges are not one.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, I think once I've set my mind to something, like, I'm pretty determined. I like to think I'm pretty ambitious, and I am very determined, and you'll probably see that if you ever speak to any of my clients. They'll go, yeah, she doesn't give up. But it helps people. Like, I am obsessed with that feeling of accomplishment when I see my clients do what they set out to achieve. And I absolutely love the little wins they get along the way as well. And like little things that click when they go, oh, this happened today, or oh, I lost that bit of weight, but I'm eating more and my training's getting better. And I feel great and I've got loads of energy. And oh my God, I've actually done it. That's really cool. I really, really like, and I think that's quite infectious. So I think that's some of where I've gone, I'm intrigued now. I kind of want to see what this is about. Yeah.
I feel like my personality comes through my coaching a lot as well.
Okay.
Through a constant need to overachieve. Where my clients will, like, I've got this one client, Andrew, and he signed up and he was like, I just want to lose a bit of belly fat. And I was like, yeah, okay, we can do that. Within a month of working with me, he was like, oh, like, I now want to, like, bulk up a bit more and, like, tone up and get bigger. And I was like, yeah, we can do that. And then within, like, another month of that, he was like, I actually want to run a 10K now. Like, he's never run before. And I was like, yeah, we're going to run a 10K. And I'm going to sign you up for it. I signed him up straight away. And I was like, and I've set you a time goal. And he's like, what? And I was like, yeah, we're going to do it in less than an hour. He was like, it's in like 2 months, Will. And I'm like, yeah, I know. We're gonna do it though. It's at the end of next month. So.
See, it's exciting. Do you find it exciting?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. See, I love it. but there's always that voice going, they're not going to do it, and that's your fault. Like, you've done something wrong that's going to stop them. Or they don't lose weight. So for the most part, most of the people I work with come to me with performance goals, or that's what they put down on the application form, or when I first start talking to them, that's the first thing. And once you start chatting to them, I'm like, oh, but I would quite like to lose a bit of weight. I would say over 90% of the people that I work with want to lose some weight. Even if it's not what they initially say is their goal, it's where they get to. So even if they don't lose weight, because balancing performance and weight management is really hard, and you'll see it from coaching for certain things and then trying to lose weight at the same time. It's not always compatible. So I'm always realistic in saying, look, well, there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's about how your body responds and how you feel about the whole process. But when they don't do it and you see that disappointment, it's really hard, because you're like, they've trusted you and it's not happened. And I know it's not happened yet. We still need to figure out what's quite right for you, or it just needs to take a little bit longer, because it isn't going to be a quick fix. I never work in fads or quick fixes. And that's sometimes harder, because you're like, are they going to lose faith in me? Are they going to get fed up of working with me? Like all that spiel that goes around your head, and you're like, right, enough, stop it, just get on and do, because you know what you're doing. And like, it's one of the things my partner says to me all the time. I will go, oh, would you believe it? It worked. What I said worked. And he's like, yeah, it's because you know what you're talking about. I'm like, I know, but every so often it's that sort of crisis of confidence, I think. But I do. And the more success I see my athletes get, the more I'm like, no, I do know what I'm talking about. I can make this work. And if I can do it for other people, why am I not doing it for myself? Like, and it's that practice what you preach thing, isn't it? It's like, I know exactly what I need to do for me. Let's just fucking do it.
I feel like, again, I have the opposite issue with my coaching. Right. I never doubt myself and my programming.
Send some of that over this way. I could do with a bit of that.
I always put it down to their confidence in themselves, because I've got way more belief in the people I coach than they do. And it doesn't matter on how confident they are in something. Like some of my gymnasts are like, yeah, I'm going to be one of the best at this competition. I'm going to win this competition. And I'm like, no, like, you're not just going to win this competition. You're then going to qualify for like the next level of competition, and you're going to win that. And then one day you're going to be one of the best in the world. And they're like, that. What? And I'm like, yeah, I don't care like how confident you think you are. You can always do more.
Do more. No, I love that. Completely love that approach. And I kind of think I try and instill that in clients. Yeah, I think it's my own sort of...
you don't want to overpromise.
Yes. Yeah. Whereas maybe I should just see where it gets me. It's because I do sometimes think it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? If you don't believe something, it's not going to happen. Yeah. And I do catch myself and go, come on, this is daft. But I have infinitely more confidence in my clients than I do in the stuff that I do. And I know, I'm aware, I'm working on it. So yeah, it's a funny one. But I started, don't know whether... Do I want to talk about this? So I started working with a therapist in probably March because of all of this. And I think I'd had such a gear change going from corporate nutrition to totally the sort of in control of my own destiny, if you will. And my anxiety was through the roof. Constantly overthinking everything, worrying about everything. And I noticed it. I'm quite a sociable person with friends. I like being out the house. I like interacting with others. And I noticed that changing. Something's not quite right here. Don't need to see a doctor. I don't feel like it's that far yet. But I do want to talk to somebody neutral. To someone that doesn't know me. Try to figure out what's going on up here. Make sense of it and start to reason with it. Because I knew what I was thinking and telling myself was unreasonable. And it was over the top. It was unnecessary. Didn't know how to reason with it or make sense of it. So I was like, fine, I'm going to have therapy and figure it out. And we sort of have this weekly call now, and you come off the call feeling lighter. And certain times he will say, you've been like, listen to the language that you're using. Like, he has like a list of banned words, like things you're not allowed to say, and I don't even realise I've said it when I'm just sort of nattering away, having a sort of chat about how my week's gone or whatever. And then there's other things where I'm like, I'm frustrated at this, and it's annoying me because it's niggling and it's constantly there, and it helps to work through it. And you come off the call feeling lighter, like a weight's lifted, because you've just listened to someone tell you you're not being ridiculous. It's not unreasonable to think like that. It happens to other people. Now get on, like get on and do. So yeah, it's reassuring to hear someone tell you.
Yeah, it's amazing how much language can give away.
I'm terrible for it. I know I'm terrible for it.
I feel like everyone is, but most people don't pick up on it. But then therapists have got a very, very good way of just being like, no, don't say that. And I find it funny because it's not just what you're thinking is reflected through your words, how your words then reflect on how you think, and it'll impact and make the issue worse.
Completely. Yeah, because I haven't always had these levels of anxiety and this level of... I've probably always been an overthinker, and I've probably always been a bit of a control freak. I like to be in control of the situation. It's fine. I'll accept it. But you see, even that, he would have told me off for using it in that way. So I'll have a chat with him later. But I've lost my train of thought now. Where were we? I've totally gone off.
Just talking about the language you use.
Yeah, completely. So, and you catch... Like, I would never speak to clients or even friends or family in the way that you think about yourself. And I know that's really common. And I do a huge piece with clients that need it. Not everybody. Some people have already got it nailed. And the language we use around talking about food. And it's that constant language about restriction. And, oh, I shouldn't have that. Or I can eat that because I can burn it off in training later. Or I don't, like, oh God, I've just eaten a McDonald's and I'm going out for drinks tonight, and, well, tomorrow's going to be a write-off then. And it is exactly that. It's that the more you talk in that way, the more that sort of barrier to a good relationship with food happens. And it filters into, like, all walks of life, because you'll see it with training, like you said, if you've got people who, although maybe not with your fierce confidence in everyone's ability. But it absolutely has a part to play, and I will gently catch clients if I hear it in that. Like, everyone has like negative body image days, and it doesn't matter what level of ability you've got. We all have days, and everyone will have a day where they're like, oh, I feel like a sack of spuds today, or I just don't feel right, or things aren't quite right. And then with that mental clarity and that mood piece, food also has a huge part to play. So it's having that whole conversation. And again, I see it in myself, of if I've been busy and I've not eaten properly, or if I haven't done a food shop, so I've got nothing in and I'm just sort of scrambling for stuff, and I get hangry. I'm not a nice person to be around when I'm hungry. And I notice it affecting my mood. I get snappier, I struggle to concentrate as much, I don't get tasks done as quickly. And it's that self-care in a different way. Like, I've heard you absolutely champion, and rightfully so, about the mental health discussions and being more open and chatting. And as a coach, you'll talk about physical health, so strength and fitness and endurance and all of that kind of thing. And food has a role in all of that, and the nutrition has a role in all of that, and it sometimes just gets a little bit forgotten about, because I think everyone has to eat. Everyone makes decisions about food. I mean, we're smacked in the face the second you leave the house, or maybe not even, with social media, supermarkets, takeaways and everything. It's about making decisions that complement that physical and mental health in the same way. And yeah, this language is a huge piece in all of that, in what you deserve, what you should be allowed, or it's that whole I can't, I can, or I should and I could and I will, all that different language. But I could talk about that for ages.
I do actually want to take that on to the actual nutrition side of things now then, because as you'll know from listening to the podcast, I am one that will not have the best nutrition going into my challenges, and it's something I desperately need to change. So, for example, I did a Olympic lifting competition a few years ago. I'd signed up like a good few months prior. I was training consistently for it, and then I had a change of work and jobs and moved house, so I couldn't go and train anymore. So I ended up training here in this room, like I mentioned earlier. This used to be my gym. So I did some training here, but again, it's not the best place to train for Olympic lifting. So I ended up not training for it for like 8 weeks probably. And then I forgot that I'd signed up to go down a weight class from what I was used to competing. So I used to be competing at the 89 kilo category, and I was about 86, 87 kilos. And then it was 10 days before the competition. I remembered that I'd signed up to be in the 81s.
Oh no.
So I basically had 1,000 calories a day strictly for those 10 days to make weight, and I weighed in at like 79.9 on the day.
Did it affect the outcome of the event?
Well, this is what I've always questioned, because I hit PBs at the event.
Yeah.
So somehow, without training and without eating, I weighed in the morning of the competition, and then I had like a couple of hours, and I bought a massive Tesco's bag full of food, which I then just stuffed down my face.
Nice.
I was so hungry, like it got to the point I'm used to eating like 4,500 calories a day.
Great. That's
So,
good. I like that.
For me to not eat, be tired all the time, get headaches, feel like I'm going to pass out constantly, and then go and perform really well. Like, I have no idea what.
Did you feel better after you'd hoid all that food back?
I still just felt awful and hungry, and like my body was just broken.
Yeah. And it's dead tricky. That's why I think there's that huge confusion around food and nutrition, because you're still able to go out on PB. But what I see from that is that amazing. I think that's testament to your training and your fitness levels, and the fact that you trained for that for a while. I know you said your sort of routine was thrown off, but it was within your remit of ability. So you did it, amazing. But what I don't want to hear my clients experiencing for 10 days, that's a huge chunk of time to feel like that, is all of that, those horrible symptoms. And yours is a unique situation because it just happened that way. You didn't plan it. You didn't forget that you'd gone down a weight category. But like, it wasn't conscious. You weren't like, I'll forget about that for the time being, and then I'll deal with it when it gets here. It just happened that way. So I would be working to go, right, for the next one, we want to gradually maintain your power, obviously, increase if we can, but gradually lose that weight so that you don't have to do what you've done for the last 10 days, so you don't have to feel like shit, so that you have plenty of energy, you're still feeling strong, you're confident that when it comes to the weigh-in, you're going to hit that target as close as is possible, because again, you don't want to drop too much weight and then end up at a disadvantage because of it. So yeah, we sort of would go back to the drawing board and go, okay, so prime example of what you did last time. Let's not do that this time. Try again.
Yeah. The thing with me and food is it's always been something I don't really think about too much.
Which is really common.
So I used to tried to be a bodybuilder before.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I ever got over 80 kilos. I was always like comfortably like body weight wise, which this is going to be really light for someone of my height, was always 72 kilos.
Wow, yeah.
That was my weight. Like,
but if that's normal for you, is what it is.
Yeah. And I was really skinny. Like, naturally I'm a good runner. Hate running, but naturally I'm good at it. So 72 was comfortable for me, but I hate how I look at 72.
Okay.
So then I was like, I'm going to bulk up.
I was just about to say, so that was why you did...
Yeah. And I went from 72 kilos to 96 in 6 months.
So you were eating a lot.
6,500 calories a day, minimum.
Were you tracking?
Yeah.
And so again, my knee jerk to that, which absolutely, so no, non-critical, you have to. And I think for somebody who's naturally really slim and athletic, it's so much harder. It's so much harder to gain that weight. And so you've got that basic requirement of the amount of food that you need just to keep you alive, to keep you healthy, to keep your body functioning, body temperature regulation, all of that. Then you're weight training, so you need more on top of that. And you're wanting to gain bulk, so you need more on top of that. So I'm not at all surprised. Did you find it a hard amount of food to eat though? Like, did you get sick of constantly eating? Yeah.
Especially since I was eating clean as well. That was so the hardest bit.
Yeah, and it is, and it's so much harder because there's less calories in it. So if you're trying to hit a calorie target with like lean proteins, complex carbs, fruit and veg, like that's a huge amount of pasta, a huge amount of steak or chicken or fish or whatever it is to get you to where you want to be. And were you able to maintain it after?
Well, I actually plateaued then at 96, and no matter how much I tried to eat, I couldn't gain the weight. And I did that for another, like, it was at least 3 months, if not longer. And I was like, I'm just not putting on any weight. And then I gave up with it because I was like, this isn't worth feeling sick and forcing food down me.
Just expensive, right? Like 6,500 calories, that is an expensive food shop.
Yeah. But it's like, even now, I'll comfortably eat like 3,500, 4,000 calories a day. I find it hard to...
I need you to have a chat with some of my clients, actually. Like, come on, if he can do it, buck up.
Yeah. I genuinely find it hard, and it's not the eating part I struggle with. It's the meal prep that I struggle with, and the time it takes to cook that much food.
Yeah.
But, like, again, I will struggle to put on weight, and I know it's because I trained so much. But, yeah, me gaining weight it's just not a thing.
And it is, and that's why... there's no one size fits all. One generic nutrition plan off the internet, just the same as a generic training plan off the internet, will work for some people, but it just doesn't work for others. Like, my brother is, I don't know, 6'2", but exactly the same thing. Has always been, even from a kid, a rake, like really slim. And every time he's ever tried, he's hiked up his nutrition, his calories, in the gym, minimal cardio, just trying everything, and he gains a little bit. And then once he goes back to normal, like normal training or normal eating or whatever, he goes back down to whatever is his plateau. Whereas you'll get other guys who will gain the bulk, but it's like rugby player, like stocky bulk, and like for you that might never be possible just because of your genetics. And I think that's where, and I don't get it with athletes, but I think earlier on with when I was working with clients, I was still figuring out the exact client group that I enjoyed working with and wanted to put my time into. And I would work with sort of your recreational gym goers who maybe train 3 times a week, maybe do a class, or and are constantly beating themselves up about wanting to lose weight, not being able to lose weight, starving themselves on like crazy diets. And this isn't me critiquing these people, it's the impact of what society tells us we should be doing from like a weight loss perspective. And I'd be working with them, and they'd have these ideologies from social media or from athletes you've seen competing in competitions, and they want to be there. And I'm like, but your body shape is different. Like, you're not ever going to be like that. And like, you look at swimmers or rowers and you think they're tall, broad-shouldered. Yes, that's developed from training, but naturally they're probably already like that. Like, you're not going to train yourself taller. Like, you are a tall, broad-shouldered person that probably lent to that ability in the first place, to finding that talent in the first place. And I think trying to create that from something that you're not, because it doesn't mean you can't do it. just means that what your outcome is, you just have to accept that that might be something different from a physique aesthetics perspective. And it's the same with nutrition. Like, you can't assume that what one person does. Like, if I tried eating the amount of food that you eat, it'd be a disaster. Like, and I like food. I'm constantly thinking about it, whether I'm thinking about it for myself or thinking about it for clients. Constantly think about my next snack or my next meal, or if I'm going to be out, what am I going to be eating, sort of to fill the gap. Like, I got stuck in traffic yesterday. I missed lunch because I was busy. Got stuck in traffic for longer than I wanted to, and I'd had to nip into a supermarket to grab some things. I was the definition of hangry by that point. Grabbed a packet of croissants and ended up eating them in the car. And I was like, I know that that's rubbish. It's not what I need. It's not really what I want, but it served a purpose at the time. And it's something I actually say to my clients quite a lot, is eating something is better than nothing. I would rather you are hitting food intake points than starving yourself just for the sake of, this is not the ideal, or I shouldn't be having that, so I'm not going to have anything at all. But yeah, I mean, 6,500 calories is huge.
It's excessive.
Well, it's not excessive if that's what you needed. Like, if that's what you needed at the time, I think that I would much rather see people hitting that. And I will caveat this because you're very active, so it's what your body needs. I'm not saying someone kind of who doesn't really do any movement, sat on the sofa, to be hitting the same thing. But the bit that scares me more is people at the other end of the scale who are doing that 1,000, 1,200 calorie diet as a day-to-day. So you did it for a purpose, for short term, to achieve what you needed to. Absolutely fine. They're happy to support that. But I work with, I was going to say female athletes, but I do see it with the male athletes I work with as well. Will go opposite end, and that's either deliberate, they're deliberately cutting in an attempt to lose weight, or they're just so busy they forget to eat. I can't ever imagine what that feels like, because I have an appetite and I get hungry, so I have that sort of reminder. But I work with people who are really not interested in food, and it's there as a functional. I'll eat it because I know I need to eat, but not really that hungry. They're harder to work with than the people. Not in a I don't mean that in a nasty way. It's just harder, because trying to get someone to eat more when they couldn't care less about food, and they're sort of shoveling it in, going, I'm not hungry, I'm feeling full. And I'm like, trust the process, like it's there to do a job. And it always does. Eventually you get that. But it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I was going to ask about that, is how important the consistency of like eating is, because like you're saying, like I relate to that, because I will quite happily go a full day without eating. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. Like, I'll get hungry, but I'll be like, oh, I've got stuff to do. A great example actually is a couple of weeks ago we was going to do the fan dance route. So over Pen y Fan, down Jacob's Ladder, and then back again with kettlebells to celebrate 1 year of the podcast. Okay. And I realised when I got there that the day before I hadn't really eaten. I was too busy with work. No. I think I had like a milkshake in the morning on the Saturday, and then we were doing it on the Sunday. So I barely ate on the Saturday. And then I woke up on the Sunday and I was like, I've got stuff to do, so I'll do some work first. And then my plan was to stop off at Tesco's to buy loads of food, and it was going to be for everyone. Yeah. And then I was like, I'll get more for me for breakfast as well. And then I left my wallet at home, so I couldn't pay for it. I had £50 worth of food in the basket.
Just had to leave it there.
And I was like, sorry, can you just put all this back for me? And then I rocked up, and then one of the guys was like, I'll buy you a bacon bap. And I was like, okay, that's something.
Something's better than nothing. Yeah.
And then I was just like, I did that whole thing. And then when I got home, I didn't feel that hungry. So I was like, oh, I've got like some other bits to do now. So I don't think I really ate much afterwards either.
So it's twofold. So in answer to your question, consistency is absolutely key. So I have a lot of athletes who it's very much all or nothing. And I kind of get that with their training. Because they're told you need to do this session on this day and this is what you need to do. So it's right, I can jump in fully on board with this. Whereas with nutrition, I think sometimes it's harder, and this isn't for everyone, this is a generalisation, but I think it's harder to accept there's no such thing as perfect. Because stuff does happen, life happens, and that's something that I think I am hugely big on emphasising, and I will try and drum it home for everybody, is that it's life happens. So for some people it's kids, some people have crazy busy jobs, or you might be a shift worker, so your routine, you can't have a routine because you're eating around night shifts or day shifts or travel or any of that kind of thing. So getting consistent at something is so much better, and it's so much more effective. And I will get athletes who will come to me and go, right, I really need to sort out my training nutrition because I've not got enough energy, I'm not training to the sort of standard that I know I can, or my training's plateaued, or any of those kind of sort of red flags where you go, something's not right. And I almost always take it back and go, okay, well, outside of training, what are you eating? Because more often than not, they're either completely under eating, or it's so inconsistent in what they're having. You're kind of, so even with those snacks that you would have taken with you had you remembered your wallet, you're kind of starting at a disadvantage because you've not had anything for a couple of days before, or you've not had a lot for a couple of days before. And particularly when we're thinking about ultras or like Ironman, when you're out for like hours and hours and hours of the day, regardless of what you take on during, you're gonna hit a wall because you didn't have it in the tank to begin with. You also then run the risk of all the gut upset, unwanted stops for the toilet, vomiting, all of that kind of stuff, because your stomach is not used to that amount of carb and that amount of food hitting it as regularly as it does whilst you're doing an event. And particularly for runners, the physical mechanical movement of running plays merry hell with your gut. So it's like an added layer of, I think it's something horrible, like over 75% of ultra runners will experience sickness and vomiting at some point in events, because it's just a bit of a recipe for disaster. So you're outside of training and outside of race day been able to get consistent at hitting 6,500 calories from carbs, from protein, from fruit and vegetables, beans, pulses, fats, dairy, whatever it is, whether you're a meat eater or vegan. Building up that tolerance and that consistency day to day helps when you get to the event day. So the second thing that you mentioned that I wanted to pick up on is that you said you weren't really hungry. So we see it both ways. So when you ignore that hunger signalling for any length of time, so like usually over a prolonged period, we can get by for a couple of days of eating a bit of rubbish. But over a prolonged period, if you're not giving your body the fuel that it needs, the fuel that it deserves, you are kind of sending messages that your body kind of goes into starvation mode. And I know that sounds excessive because you're probably thinking, well, I still kind of did eat. It wasn't that I literally starved myself. But going back to what I said earlier, if you're not hitting that basic calorie requirement of what your body needs just to keep you alive and functioning, there's a huge amount that we need to do, from like brain function, heart health, blood pressure, keeping the blood moving, cell regeneration, recovery from exercise, all sorts of stuff just from a basic level. If you're not hitting that kind of calorie intake, let alone what you need to maintain your training, your body slows your metabolism right down, because what it wants to do is store the energy from the food that you're eating rather than use it for exercise. Because actually exercise at that point becomes a bit of a luxury, a bit of an unnecessary privilege. It doesn't make or break whether your body stays alive and working or not. So it kind of ignores what's going on in the muscles and that responds to exercise. Instead, it concentrates on those basic essential functions. So by slowing down your metabolism, it's choosing to store that energy, and it interferes with that hormone hunger signaling process. So you don't get the same response in the brain and those same hormone productions that goes, all right, I'm hungry now, where's my food, I want to eat, or the, okay, I'm full now, let's ease off, because all of it's hormones. So when you mentioned then that your appetite kind of gone, probably why, because you're kind of suppressing your own natural process because your body's going, well, I don't know when the next meal's come in. I don't know when the next source of fuel's come in. So I'm just going to slow everything down, work on basic functions. And the way that can then manifest over a really long period of time, you start getting more injuries. So things like stress fractures and niggles. So it's not necessarily big injuries. You can end up with niggles, illness. We see this a lot in all sorts of athletes, but particularly swimmers, because you've got that exposure to hot, cold sort of temperatures, bacteria, thriving environments. So you get that kind of impact. Your training may or may not change, because like from chatting before and sort of chatting through this podcast, you have an irritating natural ability to just go out and do. But I always say, imagine if that's what you can do running on empty, imagine what you could do if you were fueling right. Like, it could be a whole other level. It's not to say that you are at your absolute peak at the moment. It's, okay, well, this is where we are in kind of suboptimal conditions. If we leveled up on this, where could we get to next? And then for other athletes, it's absolute. They will have to stop on the bike. It's like game over. Usually, so like with Ironman athletes, it's easier to take on fuel on the bike. So I'll hit that bit to what they think is an all right amount. Then they get off and they get to the run, and then it all goes tits up. And they hit the wall, they run out of energy, everything, like making that transition from the bike to the run. From the bike to the run. Using your body in a totally different way. Your muscles suddenly go, absolutely not. Like, nah, game over. We've used up what was available to us. We don't want to take on any more fuel because our tolerance decreases as well. I don't know what your appetite was like on any of the events that you've done, but it does decline. So where your energy requirement stays the same or increases, your appetite goes down. Your ability to like literally physically stomach the food and the things that you need to eat, it becomes quite mechanical rather than, oh, I get to eat this now. Oh, brilliant. It becomes here we go, just chuck it back, get on with it. Kind of thing. So yeah, two sides of it for you to ponder there, but yeah, consistency is absolutely, consistency in your day-to-day is what gets you the results in your in sort of event race day. So
yeah, it brings me like so many questions as to how nutrition is going to help me personally. Because I'm just thinking back over all of my events, and like my first ultra marathon, there was a requirement of bringing a certain amount of calories with you. And I was like, I know I'm not going to eat like that. I knew.
Can you remember what it was?
I can't remember. I think it was like 2,000.
Okay, so it's still not a lot.
No, but I was like, I've got a loophole here. I just have to bring it with me. I don't have to eat it. So I literally just got a jar of peanut butter that was 2,000 calories, and I just chucked it in my bag, and I was like, it's not going to get touched. So
wow.
So yeah, I did that whole ultra.
So did you eat any? You must have eaten.
I had a handful of jelly beans.
And that was it.
That was it, and that was on the first checkpoint. I came in within 1 minute of the cut-off, so I did it in 9 hours 59 minutes.
Yeah.
On my hip flexor.
So that's like, oh no.
Yeah.
So there you go. See, my nutrition brain's there going, okay, so you just made it under the cutoff. Imagine if you're fueling properly, how much more energy you would have been able to have. And then you mentioned about tearing your hip flexor. Could nutrition have had a role in that, in terms of were you fueling or were you adding extra strain to, and this is hypothetical because obviously I didn't know you, I don't know the details of your training program. But that's where my brain goes when I hear all those little sort of, I say little red flags. It's not. But all the things that made it harder for you, it's a discussion on can nutrition change that? And usually it can influence for the better when it's used as a tool, just as training is used as a tool to achieve something.
Yeah.
But I like it because even if someone doesn't think they're particularly interested in nutrition, or even if they think they've got it nailed, it always sparks a conversation because you can relate back to the food you eat and the experiences that you've had. So I do like it. I do quite like it when I get to sort of pick at what other people do.
Oh, you could pick apart my diet all day long because you'll just be like, what the fuck are you doing, Will? Like,
it's probably nothing I've not seen before. I've seen some wild diets or lack of. It's good fun. I think my favourite, I worked with somebody ages ago, and it actually, he wasn't particularly willing to listen. I'm not quite sure why he sort of looked for the support of a nutritionist, because he kind of thought he already had it nailed. He was only eating one big meal a day, and it was not the right sort of food for what he needed, for what he was doing. And I tried explaining, and I'm a huge advocate for empowering the athlete. So I will never just tell someone what to do. I will explain why my brain's gone that way, why I'm suggesting it, what I think the outcome will be, and how it can be used as a tool for them going forward. Because it's a terrible sales model, but I don't want athletes to need to work with me forever, because I want them to be able to do it themselves and to figure it out, because then it means I've done my job. Because eventually your sporting career will change, or will adapt, or end, or I don't know. I'm not here to stipulate, but you still need healthy relationship with food going forward for health. Like, we talk about an ageing population. We want to be a healthy old population. Like, we want to be strong old people, right? We don't want to be sort of reliant upon sort of walking aids and surgeries and things to be able to prolong life. You want to be able to do it through training, and through food has a huge part to play in that. And I'm a huge advocate for that kind of way of working. And I do look at some of my clients and think, I'm not sure how long your bodies are going to last, because of the extent of the adventure that they have, but the way they almost take their fitness for granted and then kind of abuse the other elements because they don't see the relevance, or it's kind of, and it's not a criticism, because life is busy and we're all juggling a lot of everything. But because I come at it from my food angle, I'm like, right, let's sort this out.
That's why, like, professional sports teams have lots of individuals, because they can't manage it themselves. Like, one person can't manage a whole team competing at that level. They need the expert advice from everyone. And I feel like nutrition is one of those things that I'm lacking. Okay. But it's the change I'm trying to make now.
And you're aware of it. So you're aware it's not your strongest element of. So I think that immediately it helps, rather than sort of flitting through going, yeah, this is fine, this isn't a problem, I'm just gonna wing it and crack on. You're aware about it and trying wanting to change it.
Yeah.
But you do, of the challenges that you've done, there are, like, the conversation I'd have with you nutrition wise would be different for each one of them. Like, your requirements are different. So even within an individual, at different periods in their life, or different sports, whatever the discipline is that they're doing, will require different things. So, like, I wouldn't talk to you about an ultra event in the same way that I would have spoken to you about cutting for that competition. Like, totally different ends of the spectrum, totally different requirements. You would have had to fuel. So for all we could look at it and go, yeah, 6,500 calories, you probably do need that for your ultra, and you probably do need it for that bulking up. But the way we're going to do it, and the way we're going to use it, the types of food that we're going to eat within that to get you to that point, quite different. So yeah, loads to explore.
So this is going to be a completely selfish question, but I hope the listeners get something out of it. How would you, like, what advice would you give for someone doing a challenge like me now, knowing what I've been like previously? So, like, I've got my Thai marathon coming up, my Thai flip marathon. I'm trying to get to a point now. I feel like my challenges before were a test of my mental resilience. That's how I've seen them. So I'm like, I don't need to focus on training. I don't need to focus on nutrition. How far can I push myself? And now I'm coming at it from a point of, well, I know I'm mentally resilient. I am pushing my mental resilience, but how far can I push everything? Yeah. And nutrition is my weakest link. So how can I improve my nutrition for this challenge?
Yeah, so I would say to anybody who's kind of, I'm not going to say starting out because you're not, but as an initial discussion with anybody, it would be start slow and steady. We have that all or nothing mindset of jumping straight in at the deep end. And that's not to say that you couldn't hit hefty numbers of calories straight from the off again, but actually it's about, there's a huge piece of like mindful eating and listening to how your body responds to what you're eating. So tuning in during a training session and understanding, like before this session, am I hungry? Am I starting this session hungry? And have I ignored it because I've been busy? Or actually, I had a pretty decent breakfast this morning, so I'm feeling pretty good to go. Or am I feeling strong? Like just basically, I could list all of them, but starting off listening to your body and how it's responding, and then gradually building it in. So looking at your meals, like, are you hitting consistently? It doesn't have to be 3 meals. It can be any number of meals. I say it doesn't have to be at least 3. So at least 3 meals. And what sort of things are you eating within that? Because it doesn't really matter. So if we take this from an endurance perspective, so perhaps take like your competitions with your weight cut and purely strength based out of the equation. Your plate should look the same, kind of irrelevant of what the event is, because you need the protein. So most athletes are pretty good at understanding protein. They're keen to want to eat more. It's quite, I mean, like whoever did the PR for protein needs to do the same for carbohydrates, because everyone hones in on that, and actually your carbs is primarily where your energy is coming from. So you need to make sure that you are regularly throughout the day hitting all of those markers with some protein, with some carbohydrate. We want fats throughout the day as well. So starting off building a regular daily routine, and I wouldn't even say focusing on calories, just looking at what you're doing at the moment and building that pattern in. And it might be that you look at me and go, I'm already doing that, like I'm already eating. So then we would look at building onto it. So bigger portions. What are you eating for your snacks? Are you thinking about what you're eating around your training session? So I don't know the ins and outs of the training that you've been doing at the moment, but I imagine you've got cardio based and strength based to be able to do the duration.
So pretty much I'm doing running, because 2 weeks after my attempt I'm doing an ultra marathon. And then I'm doing tire flips, and that is literally all of my training right now. I'm either doing hour plus of tire flips or I'm doing hour plus of running. Okay, so it's always at least an hour of a session. High intensity for the most part, would you say? Pretty low intensity, in the sense that it's like, I never really get out of zone 2. Oh, okay, fine. So we look at it both ways. From an intensity perspective, I guess in terms of what feels intense to you. So if something feels like a moderate to high intensity training session or a longer duration session, so once you start to extend out that duration of run, if you start to, I don't know what your training is going to look like, or if you're just going to wing it on the day, we want to look at what you're eating beforehand. So timing of, make sure you leave a gap between eating and starting exercise so it's got time to be fully digested. Just the same as earlier when I was talking about how the body prioritises like key functions, it does the same thing between different like day-to-day functions. So whilst you're eating, all of the blood flow, all of the hormonal processes are focused on your digestive system. Once you start exercising, the blood leaves the digestive system and then goes to your muscles. It focuses on getting that oxygen to the muscles that need it most, basically. So what you don't want is a belly full of food when you start exercising, because it's just going to sit there, particularly when you do your, probably even with the tire flip marathon, because of the duration, the endurance side of it and the repetitive movement of, and especially when you do your ultra. If you've got food just sat in your stomach, that is an absolute recipe for vomiting or diarrhea, and it's not the combination that you want. So you've got to build up your tolerance day to day and figuring out the types of foods that work for you. So I would always say, and this is contentious because not everybody has the same opinion as me, I don't like fasted exercise. Always have something before you train. And I know for early morning exercises that becomes a bit trickier because some people will just roll out of bed and into the gym. But there is always room for something. So even if you're drinking your carbohydrates, so a glass of orange juice, or a glass of a smoothie, or even if you've got
energy powders or any of those kind of products, chucking some of that back, having something just to give you the fuel for your training session, and then thinking about what you're having afterwards. So particularly when you're doing the tire flip from a strength perspective, the protein immediately priority. But even with the protein, you still need the carbohydrates, because you need the energy to physically do it, and you need the protein to recover and to repair the muscles and to prevent injury. And I know at the moment growth of muscle's not really the goal, so we would be focusing on maintenance and repair and tuning into like any injuries or niggles. Any of those things start happening, your protein requirements go up, because again, your body prioritizes. So if you're injured, that's where it focuses its attention with the protein and the muscle repair. So whilst you're repairing something else, if you're not fueling with enough, you then run the risk of triggering injuries elsewhere. So I kind of look at it in all of those senses. And the more that you can build up that kind of a tolerance around, so I jumped then actually. So carbohydrates provide your energy. This is a very simplistic approach, but it's kind of the crux of it. So your energy comes from your carbohydrates. Your recovery comes from your protein and your fats. And then the support network is your hydration and your fruit and your veg. And without one of those, that whatever you want to call it, the circle, the pyramid, the whatever you want to call it, starts to fall apart, because you are missing a link. There we go, in the chain. You're missing a link. And everyone's different. So I joked about protein, but I've got a lot of the ultra runners that I work with are plant-based. And it's interesting, I've had a discussion with a few of them about, like, I wonder why. It's definitely more common within that area of the sporting world than others. So protein immediately becomes an important factor, because it isn't as easy on a plant-based, and you absolutely can do it. I'm a big advocate for supporting athletes in whatever their dietary preference, whether you're a big heavy meat eater or whether you are entirely fully plant-based. There are ways we can do it. It's just that on both parts, they become priority nutrients. So if you're a big meat eater, it's probably going to be pretty easy to hit your protein intake. But are you doing that at the sacrifice of your carbs or your fruit and veg or the other elements that need to go on your plate? So yeah, on the flip side, if you're plant-based, protein's trickier. Fats, usually really easy to hit your fat target, because you end up snacking on or using more of those sort of omega heavy ingredients. If you don't eat fish, again, same sort of things. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle of trying to piece it all together, and I think that's why I like it. And I'll sometimes get clients that start working with me who go, "Oh, I'm really sorry, I'm quite complicated," or like I've got this dietary requirement and I'm allergic to this and I don't really like this. And I'm like, bring it on. Like, I like it. I like when it gets a little bit complex, because it's more fun for me then to figure out for them. So I really went around the houses then. Did that at all answer any of your question?
Yeah, it did, to be fair. What I do have a question about, though, is, and because you've brought it up a few times, is your basic calorie intake that you need to maintain. And I know everyone's is different, so how can people figure out what their need is?
Yeah, so it's called your resting metabolic rate or basal metabolic rate. Kind of phrases slightly different, used interchangeably. There are loads of different calculators online. I would always say be careful. Be careful, because they're not all created equal. Particularly for male athletes or highly active female athletes, there is an equation. If you were to Google the Schofield equation, it was a way of calculating your resting metabolic rate, but this one was based on a group of male Italian athletes. It's quite old now, I think maybe from the 80s, but it's still relevant. And it's basically an equation, and I don't know how they worked it, but it's a number dependent on your age and your gender. It's a number, and they multiply it by your weight, and then they add you would then, there's another number. So Google it, it's on there. And there are other ones available. There's a Mifflin one, there is a World Health Organization one, and they're all slightly different. but they all give you a rough idea. And that is your absolute minimum. So when I'm working with an athlete, I will calculate it for them, and I categorically state you should never be going underneath this. So you will see, particularly in the world of diabetes, they talk about the ultra low calorie diets, or like 5-2 diets, or the intermittent fasting diets. Anything where there is a level of restriction in your diet is dangerous, because you are dropping your calories so low, you are not meeting your body's basic energy requirements. So find one of those equations. There's online calculators everywhere. Get that level. And then what you should do is you can find, I know I use the World Health Organization data. You get these things called multipliers, which is basically for your physical activity level. So, for example, I think you would multiply that resting metabolic rate by, 1.4, I think is roughly the number. If you are, active 3 times a week-ish, give or take. And it goes all the way up to, I think, just over 2 as your multiplier. And that is for your ultra endurance, like 5+ hours, multiple times a week. And then that gives you what your calorie target should be. We then would adjust up or down by 15% as a starting point. If you wanted to lose weight, we would adjust it down by 15%. If you wanted to look at gaining weight or bulking muscle, either or. I do work with some athletes who've unwanted weight loss and they just want to gain some weight, get control of it. We would add on by 15%. And we do it gradually, and then that's not to say we don't adjust further, but by doing it that way, it still gives us a level of control that means you're hitting what your body needs from a basic capacity. I do work on calories and I do use it. Again, it's a contentious topic of should athletes track, should they not? I personalise it based on each client and what I think their relationship with food is. If I sense any amount of disordered eating or even a full-blown eating disorder, I won't let them track their calories. I will either do it for them, or we look at more intuitive eating of what I was just saying then. So have you got protein on your plate? Have you got carbs on your plate? Fruit and veg, fats. Are you snacking? Have you got carbs and protein hitting? So generally, I'm asking for some level of food intake, not a meal, some level of food intake every roughly 3 hours throughout the day. I'm not getting you up in the night to eat. But you should be hitting those touch points so that you have a consistent, regular intake of energy and nutrition right the way across the day. So your body isn't craving, your body isn't waiting for the next amount of fuel to hit. It is constantly there, ready to go. And your body uses it so much more efficiently. Your metabolism fires up fully. And I say that there are other factors like sleep, genetics, hormones, stress. They also then start to intertwine in the whole conversation. And again, we will look at all of that as well. I'm by no means a sleep or a stress expert, but it would be remiss of me to not. And you'll see it with coaching as well, when people come in sort of half dead, had a terrible night's sleep, or they've had an awful sort of week in work and it affects their training. And it's exactly the same thing with the broader sort of health element of nutrition. So yeah, it's sort of fills around all in that way, really.
Yeah. I've never heard anyone say, like, I know about the BMR, basal metabolic rate, but I've always heard coaches say you figure that out and then that's what your base is, and then if you want to lose weight, that's when you go below it. But I really like what you said about that's your body's need. That is like what you need to survive, essentially. Yeah. And then you're going to be burning calories throughout the day. So that's where you can adjust. Yeah, absolutely. So you can't get one without the other. And I think that's where, so when AI and like ChatGPT first became a thing, I had to play around on there and asked it to tell me what sort of calories I should have. And that was horrendous because it just gave me a horribly low number. But when I first set up my MyFitnessPal account for clients to be able to share their data if they were tracking, so I could see and so I don't use it to track my own, but I had to set up a profile and I had to tell it. So just as a experiment, we'll see what happens. I said I wanted to lose some weight. This is the weight that I'm at, and it spat back
I think 1,200 calories is what it wanted me to have a day. And I know for a fact from my calorie calculations that is almost bang on my BMR for me personally. I think it's somewhere around 1,200, 1,300 for me. So that is not to say that's the same for everybody. Caveat that very highly. But then I exercise on top of that, and you are on your feet. And also from a mental capacity, for your brain to work, you are using energy, like you physically, to be able to concentrate, to make decisions, to stay alert. For you listening to me now, thinking of like actually actively listening to them be able, well, I hope, actively listening to them be able to ask questions. And like in an ultra, you're not running on the road, you are watching where your feet are going, you're constantly making decisions, you're tracking, like you're, in some instances, you're using a map, figuring out where you need to be. All of that takes mental strength and energy as well. And like we were talking afterwards, on the days where you've done podcasts a few in a row and you've been in work and then you're absolutely shattered by the end of the day. You're not physically shattered, it's your brain has burnt through all of that energy. So you've got your basic level of what your body needs. So if you imagine you're in a cryo chamber, your body still needs energy to function, and that is that basic level. And then we add all of these layers on top of, based on what you need to function mentally, what you need to function physically, even just from like running errands. And then you add on the impact of exercise and training, and it all stacks up. And then once you've got that number, that's when you adjust up and down.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got I don't know if you use this at all, but you've got your NEAT, don't you? So can you explain what that is? Because I'm probably going to butcher it if I try.
No, you're fine. So that comes from, so NEAT is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically the fancy way of saying the energy that your body burns through from non-exercise activity. So if I'm kind of a bit like what I was saying then about your brain function, or it could just be doing the food shop, cutting the grass, running around with the kids, walking the dog, I guess. Any of those things that you are doing other than just being stood in the kitchen cooking, anything that requires your body to work, to function, you're burning through calories, you're burning through energy. So that's where things like standing desks, if you're office based, having a standing desk really helps, because just by the physical movement of being stood up, your muscles are having to work. They require energy to keep you stood upright, versus being sat down where a lot of your muscles are inactive. You've also got, I'm trying to think of some examples, and even when you're asleep, so you're still burning through energy when you're asleep. Your body is using it like that. So when you're asleep is the key time of day for muscle recovery, repair, hormone balance, hormone production. It's where the body gets the bulk of all of that done, which is why when you then talk about interrupted sleep, you're interrupting those hormone cycles, you're interrupting that recovery process, which is a whole other conversation about its impact then on your training and your well-being, your health, all of that kind of discussion. So NEAT has a huge part to play. So I wouldn't necessarily say for you guys that are active by default, because it's in your genetics in terms of you love to be training, you love to be on the move. But for people who are less active and want to achieve weight changes, or they want to get sort of whatever healthier looks like to them, I think that the word healthy has been butchered a little bit. I think it's been twisted. But whatever healthy looks like to you, just having that additional movement makes a huge difference. The other one that we've got is the thermic effect of food. So we actually burn calories whilst we're eating as well, because your body has to process it, digest it, absorb it, use it. So for carbohydrates, for example, it goes through the digestive system, it gets broken down in various stages of the digestive system, broken down into glucose, then it's absorbed into the bloodstream, it's then sent to the muscles, where some of it is either used immediately. So if you're taking on carbohydrate gels during an ultra, it's going within 15 to 30 minutes straight to your muscles. You're going to use it straight away. It's in the blood, ready to go, bam. You've then got some energy stores in your muscles, and then you've also got energy stores in your liver, where the body can take the excess that it doesn't need at the moment, store it ready for later. And things like protein. Of all the protein, fat, carbs that we eat, protein requires the most energy to break it down. So it's kind of a bit silly, anecdotal, but you hear people talk about like the meat sweats. It's the body having to work hard to digest those proteins. And you talk about like a rare steak is harder for the body to break down versus a well done steak. And you can get down into the nitty gritty of that. But that's when we run the risk of going down the rabbit hole of them focusing on the things that actually aren't as important. It's really useful knowledge to have, but you want to sort of rein it in and go back to basics. So back to the basics of what we have on our plate. And I always talk about good quality protein and like good quality food. And I'm not talking about organic grass-fed beef. I'm talking about the quality being like proper whole food ingredients, nutrient dense, packed full of fibre, micronutrients, macronutrients, vitamins. There's a word that's in the right here at the front of my head, but I can't think what it is. But all of those, like polyphenols, those antioxidants, that's the word I was looking for. All of these that are going to have such an impact on every function of your body versus, like, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole, but I think it's probably a safe one with your listeners. I despise the language used in the likes of Slimming World, where they talk about food as having sins. And, you can't have an avocado because there's 9 sins in that. Well, I'd rather you have an avocado than a packet of Quavers. No disrespect to Quavers, you're getting a hell of a lot more nutrition of benefit from the avocado than you are a packet of Quavers. And so what if there's more calories in there? Because there's also more fibre, you've got more omega fats, you've got some protein, you've got vitamins, it's green, so you've got all of the array of nutrients that come from that. And I would much rather focus on quality in that direction than just what the calories say on the back of the pack. It's sort of twofold. I think calories are more important when you have a high target to hit. So it's holding you accountable in a supportive way of going, this is a high number. I can't necessarily expect anyone to intuitively know what 6,000 calories is and eat it comfortably. So tracking will help you get to that target. Whereas when we're maybe talking about weight loss, I would much sooner focus on the quality of what you're eating so that it maintains to an extent a healthy level of relationship with food, because I'd never ever want somebody to come through my doors and then leave with a worse relationship than they had before. And that is one of the most rewarding things I get from working with clients, is when particularly there's a big sort of multiple signs of disordered eating and all of a sudden they're going, don't really care what I look like anymore. I didn't check the back of the packet to see what the calories were. And like I had a female client last week, was it? Really casually at the end of a conversation, and she has battled with an eating disorder. So we've been doing a lot of work around relationship with food. And she used to be obsessively tracking her calories, and I banned her from going on it. I was like, look, we're just going to look at what's on your plate and just focus on getting those eating occasions in and giving yourself permission to eat. And she'd done really, really, really well. And then really casually in the end of a conversation last week, she went, oh yeah, I had my first period in over 12 months this week. And I was like, yes. And for your male listeners, that it might just sort of be of no consequence, but for women that is huge, because it's not just about being able to have babies, it's hormones and health, and it's a sign that your body is working as it should be, and you're fueling your body to be able to do that. And in terms of health and longevity of health, it's huge. And she was so casual with it. She was like, oh yeah, I forgot to mention. I was like, what? Like, this is huge. But yeah, seeing people relax and just have that sort of freeing up that brain space of not worrying about food and going, all right, I'm confident now because I know there's no such thing as good and bad. Like, I don't use those words. I don't use good and bad. I don't use healthy and unhealthy, and I don't restrict. I focus on what should we be putting on our plates. Let's focus on that, because once you start focusing on that, anything that's sort of less than ideal starts to fall by the wayside anyway, because you don't have the desire to eat it, or you don't have the appetite to eat it anymore, because you're so busy focusing on what we want to have and what we want to have, is good for us to have, is useful for us to have. We start to think about the other stuff less, because I know if you say to me, right, you got to stop eating ice cream, like, ice cream, no, it's bad for you, get rid of it. It's the only thing I then want. It's constantly there going, well, I'm not supposed to have it, so now I want it. And it's the same for so many people. You tell them they can't have it, or you shouldn't be having it, and then that's it. It's what people want. So yeah, huge on that, focusing on basic stuff. And it's not sexy, it's quite run-of-the-mill, it's not going to snag any headlines on papers, but it works. So it's kind of what I'll pin my hat to.
Yeah. And then the last sort of thing I want to ask nutrition-wise is supplements. My coach has sent me a long list of supplements he thinks I should get. So you're going to get me in trouble
with your coach now, are you?
Yeah, basically. It's because I asked him about creatine. Okay. I was like, I've heard a lot of hype about creatine. Is it worth me trying some? Yeah. And he basically said, yeah, but you have to be consistent with it. And I was like, yeah, like, I'm fine with that. And then he was saying, in your sessions next week as well, because there's some that are getting to more like 2 hours plus. He was like, you really need to think about your supplements and what you're taking, like you've been setting your nutrition around your training. And he's like, you need that consistent stuff. So it's like, I want you to start playing around with the different carbohydrate and electrolyte drinks. And I was like, I've never touched them before. Not a fan. And then I was basically like, look, can you just send me a list of what to buy, because I have no idea what I'm doing with any supplements. And he sent me way more than I was expecting. And I'm just like, I know half of them I'm not meant to have, because I'm not meant to have caffeine either. So that throws a spanner in the works.
Okay. We can work with it though.
Yeah. So I'm just like, what's actually going to benefit? What's going to have the biggest impact on my training? Like, I know everything's going to impact it and probably benefit in some way, but where am I going to get the biggest bang for my buck?
Yeah, nice. So he's not wrong. Creatine and carbohydrates, both really useful. Carbohydrates are essential. Creatine's not. But given the type of training that you're doing, there is loads of research to show the benefits of creatine use, and there is a protocol of how to use it. You can't just willy-nilly chuck it in. There is a protocol of how much you take, for how long you take it, gradually increasing the dose. But there is research to show its benefits. So allowing you to train harder for longer from a strength capacity, more so than to my knowledge, and please, anyone can correct me with it, send it to me. I'm always happy to learn. The bulk of creatine research is around strength and delaying strength fatigue rather than sort of cardio endurance side of things. Which is
what I'll need for my tire flip marathon.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, but the more. So it allows you to train harder for longer in a training setting. So I guess in that, the harder you can train in training, the more manageable it'll be in the challenge, I guess. And it helps from a strength maintenance, muscle maintenance perspective as well. So that is something that you don't kind of just take for the hell of it. You take it within a certain time. I think before training. Don't hold me to that. I'll find out and let you know. With your carbohydrates, so yeah, it will help. So you mentioned, before I start, you mentioned you don't like carbohydrate drinks and supplements.
I've never done supplements. I like the fact that I can just do stuff. I hate the idea of having to try to do stuff.
Yeah.
So like, even the amount of training I've put in already for this tire flip marathon is like way more training than I've done for anything in my life ever.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just someone that just trains, and then I'm like, I like that, I'll do that, and then I do it.
Yeah.
So like, the fact that I'm like, the fact that I'm even getting stressed out that I'm 13 weeks away and being like, that's not enough time to train, is like completely unusual for me.
So using supplements isn't cheating, and it's not giving yourself an unfair advantage. Like, it doesn't take away from what you're doing, it just supports and enhances. And if you were doing I don't know, how many tire flips can you do in 60 minutes? Whole of the ball game. Don't need supplements at all. But if you, and I hesitate to ask this question because of the conversation we've had, but if you were to go, so how long are you planning? 24 hours?
So it's going to take more than 24 hours. Yeah. I know that for a fact.
You wouldn't, or this is the way I look at it. Ordinarily, you wouldn't go 24 hours without eating. Just because you're in a challenge setting, that doesn't change that. We still need to get food into you. And you have heightened energy requirements on that day because you're not just sat around doing chuff all. You're working really hard, consistently, on and on and on, repetitive movement. So it's the same impact on the muscles, the bones, the same repeat mechanical impact. So you need to do what you can to protect and fuel those muscles to be able to sustain it and complete it. And I get that it's completely novel to you because actually thus far your ability, your natural fitness ability has carried you really well. So you don't have to use supplements. You can do real food. The reason supplements are so useful is because they're convenient. You know exactly how much is in the gel that you're having or the drink that you're having. You know, and usually you're getting more carbohydrate in them than you would from, I don't know, a bagel with jam. Because that's easier to just toy back a gel than it is to physically eat two slices of toasted bagel with jam. So that's why they're useful. And like when you're in an ultra, if you are having to carry as much as you can, it's easy to carry the supplements. And to, like, for your energy or your carbohydrate drinks, you've got your bottles, your bladder. You can monitor how much you've had and keep a track of. So if I say to you, you need, and this is hypothetical, you need half a litre every hour, you can physically track what you're having. Whereas with sort of without that plan or just sort of hoying stuff back as and when, you can't monitor it. You can't figure out what you need. From a carbohydrate, and the same thing from carbohydrate drinks, you need to stay hydrated. But if you're just drinking water, you are then going to do yourself damage by not adding in. So if you're sweating out all of these electrolytes and you're just replacing water, you're rediluting the blood. You're not replacing the electrolytes that you've sweated out. So that's where you can end up with cramp, pins and needles, like the worst kind of stitch, like under your rib cage. And you get all of those kind of problems. And you do run the risk of doing that because you are going to be fatiguing muscles in a really specific way. So there's electrolytes, carbohydrates, fluid in general are the three big ones. Because of what you're doing, I'd maybe also suggest some protein. But if you're mixing in supplements with real food, where you've got the real food, that's your opportunity. So if you were to have a ham sandwich or a bacon bap or even a McDonald's, like McDonald's seems to be a huge favourite of ultra runners because it's comfort food. And it's that once food gets monotonous, because you're going to lose your appetite, you're going to get partway through this, if you even had an appetite at the start, you're gonna lose your appetite, and it then becomes a thing of what is most tolerable for me to force down. And if that's like a McDonald's or a croissant, like for me, pastries, yes please, absolute. So if you can load up a croissant with some ham and some cheese or something that it's, yeah, fine, it's high fat, it's not ideal, but you still need the calories, you need the fuel. So having a mixture of real food, or like, I know from podcasts you've spoken on before, Ross Edgley, you can see what he's doing at the moment, and he'll stop on the side of the pool, eat a whole pizza, and then crack on again. And I have so much admiration. And the Tour de France cyclists, they're eating picnics on the bike. And that's not easy, because eating while moving and eating, for Ross, is horizontal. So he's totally working against the natural gravitational pull of the digestive system. But if you can do it, that's why you can go for as long as you can. And actually, I mentioned him as joke, but he's a really good example. You'll see what he's got set up on the side of the pool from his social media stuff. And it is a mix of real food and supplements. And you'll see on his bottles, he's got marker pen of what to have and when. And some of it's electrolyte tabs, and some of it's bottled drinks, and some of it's real food. And it's maintaining sort of a routine. And that usually goes out the window on ultras, because it is totally dependent on what you fancy, what you want, what the temperature's like. Your appetite will change during the night. When your body's telling you it wants to sleep, your appetite, usually you start to crave or want totally different things, or you don't want anything at all. So yeah, your coach isn't wrong. There is benefit to supplements, and the one thing, the absolute take home: do not try anything new for the first time on event day. Anything that you have on event day should have been trial tested in advance, because increasing your carbohydrate intake that much, like I said earlier, is where you get the sickness and the unwanted trips to the toilet and all those really unpleasant unwanted side effects that are going to interfere, not just interfere with your time of getting stuff done and your ability to do stuff, but actually how you feel as well, because nobody wants to feel sick, especially when, like for you, it's that like head up, head down, like bend, stand, and you run the risk of that like extra dizziness and all of that kind of stuff as well. So no, I just think reframing the mindset around this food is only going to enhance, because it's not going to, if you hadn't done any training but you had your nutrition on point, it would be a non-starter. But you are training and have been training hard for it, so by adding the nutrition, you're kind of, it's adding in that level of appreciation for the amount of training that you've done, and sort of going, all right, well, I've done this, I'm now going to do right by myself and fuel appropriately so that I can do what I know I'm capable of.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
I feel like I could ask millions of questions about nutrition, but
opens the floor.
I'm going to wrap it up there.
Mm-hmm.
The one question I ask to all of my guests at the end of each episode is, if you could set a challenge for the listeners for this week, what would you set?
Yeah, so I've been umming and ahhing about this one, and I think I touched on it earlier. Back to basics. So block out the noise from social media. There are some other big podcasts who peddle some quite dangerous ideologies, theories, suggestions about food. Don't worry about supplements to begin with. I just want the listeners to focus on getting good nutrition day to day in their meals, in their snacks consistently. So hitting that, eating roughly 3 times a day, even if it's a meal, then a mid-morning snack meal, and consistently getting into that routine and noticing how much better they feel for it, how much more energy they've got, how much better their training's going. And then an added, just a little bit on top, is then also considering around training. So are you waking up in the morning, rolling out of bed and not eating anything and just going straight to training? Well, part of that, getting your nutrition basics right, just have a little something before you start your training session and think about, all right, well, when I finish my training session, when am I next going to get to eat something? Because it doesn't have to be immediate, but we want something every couple of hours. So just getting consistent and eating quality rather than worrying too much about the numbers.
Amazing. Well, thank you for your time and for coming on. Where can people find you online if they want to work with you?
So Hannah Rose Nutrition on Instagram, and I've got a website as well. They're the 2 best places to find me.
Perfect. Well, I'll put it all in the description anyway. But yeah, hopefully we'll catch up soon.
Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of the Adventure Athletes podcast. If you want to find out more about our guests, check out the links in the description below, where you'll also find a link to our website, our socials, and my BigMoose fundraiser. Let us know in the comments who you want to hear from next, and we'll try and get them booked on as best we can. And if you want to get involved with anything Adventure Athletes, we've got so many things going on. We've got our programming that we'll do for people trying to take their next step into their own personal adventures. We'll do sports massage. We've got events that we're organising both online and in person, and we've got some different activity days based around getting you outdoors and learning something new. So if you want to get involved, check out the website. If you want to find out more about the guest, check out the links in the description. And yeah, let us know who you want on next.